Hello, we are seated with Juan Vallejo at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, to discuss 3D printing, primarily the software side of this amazing technology. Good afternoon, Mr. Vallejo. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you do? What do you think about living in a technological world?
Sure. Well, I'm a computer scientist, and I like to develop software for different projects I'm working on. I do research in robotics right now, primarily in robotic interfacing. And I also worked on the unmanned aerial vehicles team. So there we focus a lot on 3D printing for pretty much for spare parts of any projects we're working on, or individual drones, things like that. Well, I grew up in a third world country, and so I pretty much experienced a huge part of my life without technology. And pretty much it wasn't until I came here that became aware of how technology is able to empower people to develop a passion and an ability to create things from a very young age. So yeah.
What led you to take the path into 3D printing?
Well, it was more of a necessity, especially in research. So with unmanned aerial vehicles, we require a lot of parts, and a lot of parts break. We also work on things like mounting cameras on drones to survey an area. And so in order to achieve things like that, we can't depend on manufacturing parts elsewhere or finding them online, because chances are the company will sell what we're looking for. So we make our own parts for that, solve small problems right away in-house.
What sources and computing languages do you use? Are there other developing ones?
Well, when it comes to 3D printing, primarily you rely on software tools such as the MakerBot software to develop 3D models. You can also use Blender, which is open source, and it's pretty much used for creating meshes and just 3D shapes you can print. As far as source control, I use Git, which was developed by Linus Torvalds. He's the creator of the Linux kernel. And so pretty much that allows you to track all your files, make multiple versions of them, and share them with people, so you can collaborate on a project with multiple people without having any issues. As far as computing languages, for my projects I use C++, JavaScript, Java, even Python sometimes. Yeah.
What projects are you currently working on? Do you have any new or existing projects on the horizon?
Well, right now I work on extracting video data from robots. What the overall goal of that is pretty much allowing me to view what the robot sees on an Oculus Rift, and essentially the main goal of that would be to interact with the robot through body gestures. So with the Oculus Rift, you have an accelerometer in there, and so the robot essentially can receive information from it and track your head movements, so it moves its head accordingly. This will allow you to essentially not only depend on a keyboard, but also your body to move a robot.
When you are working on a project, how do you approach your documentation?
So documentation is something extremely useful, especially if you're working with other people, or if you expect other people to pick up your project once you're done working on it. The way I do it is I usually write my pretty much comments in my code as I write my functions in classes. Then I go back and I either generate a document from those comments, or I manually, whatever doesn't get generated, I manually write on a guide. As far as testing, I think software testing is also very useful, and that's also done as I write my software.
Can you give me an example of a project that completely failed? Were there any important lessons learned from that failure?
Sure. So about a year and a half ago, I undertook a project with it was pretty much this entrepreneur who had an idea for a music app or a music service, and all the ideas sounded fantastic. I wasn't really on board with it because I didn't think it would work. Communication wasn't also very great, so it wouldn't be very frequent that I would communicate back my progress on this. So essentially, what ended up happening was interest kind of trailed off from both sides on this project. And since I wasn't surely, aware that this idea might work, then I wasn't completely invested in it, and that kind of led to its demise.
Can you briefly tell what a beta version is? What beta items are you currently playing with?
Sure. So beta stage is pretty much a stage in the development cycle of software, and it's a stage where essentially the code is finished. The features that you essentially set out to complete are done, but you are aware that there's bugs in your code that can only be brought to light by someone else using your software. So through beta, releasing your software in a beta stage, you find bugs more quickly, and you are aware of what features you might also need that you didn't foresee in the past.
Is there any advice you would give to young students who may be interested in programming in the field of 3D printing?
Sure. So I do have something written down for that. Well, overall, I think that having a passion for what you're working on is just as important as achieving the end goal of a project. So if you're not fully committed to what you're doing, that's just going to make it a bit harder. In terms of programming, pretty much choose a language that will help you, like all your teammates, to develop a project, not a language you're just familiar with or a language you really like and you force your project into that language. So I think that's the greatest advice. Also, write code for other people, not just code you yourself understand. As far as 3D printing goes, it is a fairly new technology, but I think being patient with new technologies and taking the time to sort of research and asking people questions would be the greatest advice I could give you. Thank you.
Thank you.